Test, test, test. Cool. I think it's working now. All right. I think it's working now. Thanks for your patience, guys. I really can't tell you what happened there. But here's the deal. It's working. So let's get cracking. I plan to be live. All right, let's get this going. Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. I had to try that again. I can't tell you exactly what happened, but for some reason I just couldn't get my audio to connect. I had to shut it down and try it again, and now it's working. So I guess tech stuff. How are you guys doing today? Hope you had a great week. It's been a very busy period for me. Sorry, I had to mute my phone. And I think it's gonna it's gonna stay that way for some time. My schedule this month is really, even though it's not a lot of work, but since I commute, there's a lot of time spent just going back and forth between work and home. So that tends to add up to my time. In fact, I got back this morning and I got back around, so I left my base. I'm based in Memphis, Tennessee in the US, and I finished work around 11:30 p.m. I had to wait on my flight, which is like a jump seat or commute flight. All right, for those of you that may not know what jump seat is, I had to wait on a commute flight to get back to my home, which I live in Texas. So that took some time. Yeah, Mark. So far, from what I've gathered, I believe they said they had over 40,000 applicants, and yeah, 40,000 people applied. Of course, I'm pretty sure less than a third of those numbers made it through to the interview, or at least the flight school assessment stage, and that's because majority of the people got disqualified very early in the process. Remember that when people apply, people would generally apply from anywhere, even when they haven't met most of the requirements. So yeah, 40,000 seemed like a lot, but more than half of those people that applied didn't really have the necessary qualifications or requirements. They haven't met the requirements. So that really adds to those numbers as well. But that isn't to say that there weren't a lot of people that applied. I'm sure, those that actually met those requirements will still be in over 10,000, all right, that met the requirements to apply will still be over 10,000. And yeah. Right. They are not sponsoring international students. So due to that reason, like I said, a lot of those people get disqualified right from the onset, Now, remember that you might be international, but still have the right to live in the UK, right? Some people were born in the UK, but then they live somewhere else. They can still apply, and they can still qualify. But majority of the people that actually applied do not have the requirements. So that's hence the reason why it seemed like it's a huge number, but only few people actually are still in the process right now. I'm curious, did you apply, Mark? I need to actually check something here. For TUI, honestly, I do not know. I do not know the exact number, but that would be in the thousands as well. Because a lot of people from the UK region did apply for that. Yeah, so, I see, you didn't apply due to age. But I'm sure you're getting ready. Now you have all the resources, you have all necessary information that you need. And, depending on how old you are, one of the advice that I give to young people Um, if you haven't met the age requirement for now, what I would say is, prepare yourself for the opportunity. This is the time for you to prepare, because if you show up, especially when you submit your CV or you show up to the interview, a lot of the things that you would be tested on are based on your experiences. And if you haven't had those good experiences to share, or transferable skills, then it will be much harder for you, So take the time while you're young, try to, work on yourself, give yourself a lot of opportunities for experiences, right? And that's why I will say, if you can volunteer in places, do that. If you can take up some roles that lets you exercise your leadership skills, your communication skills, and hopefully these roles are somewhat rewarding in the sense that you're able to act, not just any role, but a role that helps you build on your competences. That's what I mean. All right. So that it would really go a long way if you could do that. All right. That's great. I like that. Keep working on those things. Keep putting them down. By the way, all right. So one thing I always say is, if you have the ability to document your experiences, just create a document on Google Sheets or Google word processor or something like that, right? And just write your experiences as you go along, especially now that you know exactly what you want to do. Because when you have a knowledge of where you want to be in terms of your career and how you want to get there, then the rest is just putting the pieces of the puzzle together. So, for example, if you're taking up roles at a place, let's say you're volunteering at a place, right? And you're given some tasks to complete. Write down just the summary of the task in that document sheet that you're writing, and you're putting down. Think about it like a journal, all right? And put those experiences down. Trust me, right? When it comes down to you making your CV, you would have a lot of information to put down. And that is good, because as a young person, majority of the time, you generally don't have enough to put down. But when you have a journal or you have a place where you keep track of the information and the things you do, not on a day-to-day basis, but maybe on a monthly basis, you kind of just, so that you don't forget. Because what will happen is, over time, you're going to forget all this information, all the things you learned, all the tasks you were assigned, all your times you failed at something, all your times you achieved something, all the times you experienced high workload environment and how you handled it. Those experiences are very, very crucial, and your ability to be able to use those experiences, put them on the CV, and then use them during your interviews would help you score a lot of points. So if you are currently in the stage where you haven't applied yet, or you're considering going into this field, start a journal. I mean, you don't have to make it complicated. That's why I said you can use like a Google Sheet, something simple that you can access every time you have access to. And you use that to kind of just keep your memories in a place where you don't forget. And when it's now time for you to make your CV, guess what? It's a lot easier, because you can just look to those documents and grab the necessary information you need and put them down. The second thing to that is, when you then go in for the interviews, you have a lot of things to talk about. All right. Now, I always say this, interviews are very interesting, because it's not really about the experiences you have, not just about that. It's also about how you talk about them, how you put out information. So there has to be some practice in that. And that's where, I would always urge you to, there's so many great YouTube channels. I'm sure you subscribed to mine. Thank you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please feel free to subscribe. But the point here is, through my videos, I share a lot of, information on how to best prepare for these interviews and how to succeed, right? And that's the goal. So talking about CV, right? A lot of people say that, sending their CV, and I could do that, the only The only issue, I'll be honest, is always it becomes overwhelming, because a lot of people will send their CVs in, and it's like, how do I don't have the time, Right now, like I said, I didn't finish my story, by the way. I started my story of how I got back from work. Go back at 5 a.m. this morning, and I only had about 4 hours of sleep. I had to start running some other errands and all that stuff, and I decided to come live now just because I just want to catch up with you guys, and but yeah, if you could send me a message on, what do you call it, Instagram, all right, we could talk from there. And that's usually the best way to interact with people. When it comes to text, it's hard to to chat on this. Just arrived. Good evening from Luxembourg. Thanks, Francisco. Awesome. Glad to have you. I'm guessing you've applied to Luxair. Did you apply to Luxair, Francisco? If you've applied to Luxair, I actually heard that they've sent out some information in regards to Luxair. And in terms of if you've applied and you've met the requirements, they've actually sent out some information on how to prepare for the next stage. I don't know if you've gotten that information or not, but if you've applied, then I would say that you should be expecting something if you've met the requirements, of course. All right. So back to Mark. So the key thing here is, make sure that you are, I see that you're already working on that. You already have your CV down. So once you can send me a message, like I said, on Instagram, and then we can catch up from there and talk more about, what recommendations I have for you. But that's really how to go about this, especially as a young person, considering you haven't applied yet. The third thing to that is, so I've talked about the CV, I've talked about the interview. The third thing I would recommend is preparing for the assessment. All right. I'll be honest with you. I've been in the industry for, again, 14 years now. And there are times where I see some of these assessments. It takes me a minute to get a hang of it, right? Because I have access to PASS once in a while. And I've used PASS pilotassessments.com. I've used it in the past, and I play around with some of these assessments. They're different for different airlines, and having access to it gives me the ability to try it out. And when I try them out, it takes me a minute, right? Because even though you fly in the airline industry, what you're being tested on isn't really related. What they are really testing on those assessments are usually your aptitudes, right? How you work with numbers, how you work with logic, things like that, right? Multitasking, workload. But flying is different. Yes, you're going to apply those skills, and your ability to put those skills to use will determine your success. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that you would be doing, some of these assessments when you actually fly. So the point here is, it takes practice to get a hang of those assessments. And that's where I feel bad for people when they tell me, my lips are dry. When they tell me that they haven't been preparing, or they heard about the opportunity at the last minute, and then they want to apply. The chances of you getting through are very slim, because the truth is, it takes a minute, I see that, Francisco. Yep. Let's hope that you get something. But yep, from what I've gathered, they've actually started sending out emails. And remember, they're only selecting a very few. Last year, they only took 20 people. I think a little bit less than 20, actually. The previous year, that was not previous year, prior to COVID, I believe. I think they only selected like 10 people or something like that. Something in low 20s anyway. I believe it was in the not low 20s, low teens, 13, 15, somewhere there. So, it's important to manage expectations with some of these programs. And that's where I always say that, don't limit yourself to these programs. If you are in the EU region, if you're in Luxembourg, you definitely you can apply to multiple programs out there. So don't limit yourself to just Luxair. Luxair is one of those that will pay up to, I believe, they pay the cost of tuition or training up front. And that's a good thing, not a lot of airlines do that. All right. I'm trying to pull up something here. Hope you guys are having a great week or evening, because most of you are in EU region. It's at night. It's night for you. It's currently 3 p.m. for me here. So I still have a long day ahead of me. Well, almost through the day anyway. But for those of you that are in that region, hope you guys are doing well. I'm trying to find. And I don't know if Mark is still on, but if you're on, I was actually thinking of hosting like a session where I could give a lot of feedback to people real time, but not on YouTube, right? Sometimes I do this. If you've used the link in my, actually there's no link in this chart. I need to put the link there. I'm going to send an email out when I have time to do this. I'm going to send an email out to people that have used my link. I need to put a link under this video. But the purpose of that CV guide that I've made is, if you use that CV guide, I don't know if you've used it. If you have, then that means I will probably have your email. And my plan is to do like a webinar, right? Oh, actually, I don't want to use a webinar. It's not a webinar. It's almost like it's going to be a more interactive one-on-one, not one-on-one, a group session where we can actually talk about CVs, and maybe a group of maybe 6 people, maybe 10 people maximum. And we can just talk about CVs and give recommendations live, right? But it's, again, like I said, it's not on YouTube. It's going to be more like Zoom or Google Meet or something like that. And the reason why I do that is, my hope and desire for all of you that have subscribed to this channel is to get to achieve the results that you want, right? Get to achieve that goal. A lot of you want to become airline pilots, and my desire for you is to achieve that. I remember being there and not knowing how I'm going to get to that other side of achieving that goal. So my purpose for this channel was actually to help people get to do that, get to achieve that goal. So one of the big things that plays a key role, all right, in becoming that is, of course, getting the funds. Let's start the basic thing. Medical, right? You have to have the ability, medically speaking, medical wise, all right, or medically speaking, you have to have the ability to do the job, right? But the next thing that always plays a big deterrent in people achieving that goal is money, all right? And for a lot of you in the EU, UK region, even in the US as well, you have the ability to get sponsored and maybe pay some of the money back. Some of you have the ability to raise loans or funds for training. All those factors, they do help a lot of people achieve that goal. So once you can sort out, once you're medically fit, once you have the funds for training or an airline is sponsoring it, the rest really comes down to you passing the assessment, right? And if you're going to pass the assessment, for example, for the cadet programs, you have to make sure that you can present yourself as a person that has the aptitude, has the knowledge, has the capability to do the job. And that is where CV comes in. That is where doing the interviews come in. That is where doing the assessments and passing them come in. Once you can get through those, the rest really is getting through the training, right? If you're selected, of course, then a little bit of luck, all right? I'll be honest, there's a little bit of luck in the process of applying to these cadet programs. The thousands of people to apply, and they're only going to take, say, 100 for BA, for example, or they're only going to take 20 for Lux Air, or they're only going to take 50 for TUI, So the numbers vary, and due to that, you need that bit of luck, performing well, being in the right place at the right time, meeting the right people that would interview you, getting the right resources, right? Resources are very key. Getting the right help when it's needed. So those are the things that you need to that you have to go through in order to get to that other side of then getting selected, then starting your training. Now, when you start your training, it's a different ball game, right? Because at this point, it's about to be real, right? You have to go through the training and succeed. So that takes a bit of a lot of work. I'll be honest, it does take a lot of work, but it's possible, right? Let's see. Totally agree on plan B and C flight schools in France and Portugal. Awesome. Yeah, that's definitely something you should have. Plan B and C. And I like your plans, by the way, Francisco. Your plans are really aviation related. So it means that you have the motivation and the drive to do this. And if you do have the drive to do it, you would do it. It's just a matter of putting in the work. All right. In the UK, it's not. That is correct. Okay, so Mark, I just read your comment, and I wish I could put this out on the screen, but you said in the UK it is not possible to get an unsecured loan for pilot training. Same thing in the US, by the way. All right. In the US, in comparison to the UK, majority of the airlines would actually they provide the opportunity, right? That once you can get your ratings and get your licenses and you go qualified, they would hire you. But the funds for your training isn't really provided by the airline. The funds are actually provided by a bank. Now, the airline guarantees that if you can get your ratings and qualify and all that stuff, pass their interview, they'll hire you. So they will give you, think about it like a recommendation that you would get hired. But then that recommendation is sent to the bank. Now the bank, it's up to the bank to then run your background check, your credit check, make sure that you can actually, you have sufficient ability to repay the loan, assuming the airline doesn't hire you. And that is where, having a good credit, I don't know what it's called in the UK, but I think it's still credit over there as well. Having a good credit, making sure that you are credit worthy, right, goes a long way. And that's when they can actually fund your training as well. So, no bank is going to just give you free money. You have to have some form of something to secure the funds, whether it's mortgage, whether it's a house, whether it's some asset, right, to back the loan. Jerome Anthony, yeah, I'm also from the UK and it's not possible to get unsecured loan. That is correct. I agree. It's like I said, the same thing in the US. There's no free money anywhere. That's just the truth about it. You have to have some assets to back up any loan you want to take. Even if you want to get a loan from a bank, right? Secured loans are very difficult and risky. Yeah, that is also correct. Why? Because the bank is taking a chance on the fact that you will pay back. Let's assume that you have an asset to back it up. So it's a secured loan, right? Now they provide you the money, but you are still, you're counting on yourself, right? And that means if for any reason the airline shuts down, right? Or for any reason the airline doesn't hire you because for some reason they weren't just hiring when you finish your training, then you're still on the hook to pay their loans back, right? So, and that's that. Nothing is given or nothing will be handed to you without something given, right? There's always that risk reward ratio that you have to always consider. But if you really want to do this, you have to do what you can. The alternative, all right, is to get your own money, which means go to school, finish school, start working in a field that you can save money and save for 5-10 years maybe, I don't know, depending on how much money you can make, and then start training. So in that way, in that case, it's your funds, it's your money, you dictate where it goes. And by the way, you are more guaranteed to actually achieve your goals because you're not relying on a cadet program, you're not relying on a bank funding you, you're not relying on anything. You are literally counting on yourself. Now, I know that is difficult because, saving £100,000, €100,000 can be a lot. It's a lot of money. $100,000, it's a lot of money. So it's not something that is possible for a lot of people. And the time lost as well, right? You spend a lot of time trying to save that money. But some people have done it. Talking about someone. One of the guys that we worked together last year made it to the BA final got through everything successfully. However, and I think I've shared this in my videos, in order for you to have been selected with BA last year, in order to have been selected as the part of the 100 candidates that made it through, you must have had a 100% score or perfect score. Literally, I mean, it's unbelievable, but that's to tell you the caliber of people that have applied to this program. And BA would only choose the best of the best. Okay, so E came 1% short. He had 98%. 98%, or not 1%, 2%, right? 98, 99, somewhere there. And being short was enough for him to not get through, because, like I said, I think I shared this in my previous video, where you can control the limitations that are in place by the airline. For example, they only want 100 people, and that means they are only going to take the best 100 people. So anybody that is, that is 99 and they are the 101 person on the list, right? They are not going to be taken because they haven't. It's just they have a number of people that they can take. Now, does that mean that the person that had 1% that is 1% short or 2% short isn't good enough? No, that's not the case. It's just what the limitations that have been imposed on the program, and that alone is enough for them to not be selected. So back to the story. He wasn't selected, but he was offered the opportunity. However, it's going to be a sponsored program. So that means he would have to, not sponsored, self-sponsored. So that means if he can self-sponsor himself, he's still going to get through. They will still hire him, which meant that he needed to have the funds for training. Luckily for him, he was already saving up for training. He already had a chunk of money saved up. Now he's not 19, he's not 20, he's a bit older, and he's had experiences. He's been able to save. He has always wanted to go train anyway. So now he has a BA contract, he has the funds, and now he's starting his training soon. And that is really, preparation meets opportunity, because the chances of him getting through BA the second attempt, even though you can always apply to BA 3 times, but the chances of him getting through on the second attempt is very slim. Case in point, a lot of people that got through to the final stage last year have not made it through till they haven't made it to the second stage. I'm talking about the flight school stage this time around. So just because you made it to final last year doesn't mean that, when you come back this time around, you know exactly what you're doing and you're going to ace everything. And then it doesn't work that way. And that's where a bit of luck, like I said, is needed at this. You would think because they made it to final last year, then they should be able to just come into through the current one and breeze through it. But it doesn't work that way. My phone is ringing here. So let me take this real quick. It's very important. Hey, baby. Sorry about that. I just had to take that call real quick. That was my daughter. So back to what I was saying, just because you made it through to the final stage last year doesn't mean that, now you're going to come through this and then you're going to blow through it because you've seen it before. That doesn't work that way. And that has a lot of people that made it to final, like I said, are now going through it now and they're struggling. Okay, so the guy that I'm mentioning, the person I'm in reference of all this conversation, discussion, he had his money saved up because he was already working towards doing it by himself. He got a BA contract, although it's not fully sponsored, but he had some money. So he was able to just put the two together, and now he's going to start training. So that's something for you guys, young people especially, to think about. If you have the ability to go into a field that you can really make good money, maybe you can save up some of the money. Again, like I said, it's not for everybody, but something to consider. EasyJet offer a self-funded program which costs 86,000 euros, or pounds. So that's not as bad as 100k. Yeah, that's correct. 86,000, in comparison to 100,000, that's still better than the 100. But the point here is you have options. You just have to think to what do you have to do to get a job done, right? Do you have to study as hard as you can and put in all the work, use all the resources that are available to you and turn things in your favor? Or not count on luck? Because like I said, in this cadet programs, there's a bit of luck involved, right? Do you just want to go your self-sponsored route where you work, save up money, raise the funds yourself, and then you go train? Hey Tom, thanks for joining in. By the way, guys, don't forget to drop the like. It goes a long way. I know it's the old YouTube thing, but the YouTube thing is hard. I don't think I've ever shared that part with you guys, and I'm being honest. It's a lot of work, but I enjoy it. The point here is I get to interact with people. I get to talk to you guys, and it's an opportunity to share what I know to help the next people or next person. That is the key thing here. I see, Francisco. I spoke to. Yep, that is correct. EasyJet provides MPL. Even TUI is MPL, right? It's an MPL program. And yes, you have to spend money to convert to ATPL. That is correct, Francisco. All right. I think I've shared this in one of my videos. If you go to my channel and you search MPL, you see some videos on, how I can't remember the name of the title of the video now. It's been a while. But I actually went into details on, why for example, MPL is not recognized in the US. There's nothing like MPL in the US. All right. So it's not something that is recognized worldwide. And it has its limitations. It's restricted to the airline. But hey, you're flying an airplane. So why don't you take it, right? It's something that has been offered to you. So you might as well take it. But I see your point. If you're going to spend money, all right, like you said, EasyJet is self-sponsored, is self-funded, all right, which will cost 86,000 pounds. So if you're going to self-fund yourself, right, through training, you might as well go take the full ATPL ride instead of the MPL, so that you have more options and you're not tied to the airline. But like you said, the airline offers you the job at the end of the day. So if you do your ATPL and you come back to TUI, they may not hire, or not TUI, maybe TUI, maybe EasyJet, would they hire you? It's 50-50, right? It depends. But if you take the MPL, there's a higher probability that they would hire you because you've been trained to do their operations. You know their operations. You know exactly, their procedures. So it saves them a lot of money. So there's some incentives for them to hire somebody that is already trained to do the job, based on TUI procedures or EasyJet procedures and stuff like that. The other thing to consider is the ATPL restriction, all right, on an MPL can be removed, but you have to do the conversion yourself. And generally speaking, all right, this is something that a lot of people don't think about. When you are going for these airlines, remember that your lifestyle really depends on so many factors, right? So let's assume that you choose an airline that is based in, London Gatwick, for example, and you're based out of there. If you live in that area, right, then your lifestyle will be a lot easier, like the stress from the job, commuting, all that stuff would be a lot easier for you because you can easily just go to work, fly, come back home and chill. On the other hand, if you choose an airline that is so out of, place for you in terms of commuting and where you live, then it will be a lot more difficult for you to enjoy that job. So sometimes it's not really about choosing between the airline that provides an ATPL or MPL. Sometimes it's just about finding the most convenient job for you. Because at the end of the day, your goal is to do this long term. We're talking about 30 years, maybe for some of you, maybe 35 years for some of you, maybe 25 years for some of you. So if you are going to be doing something that long, you have to consider the lifestyle that comes with it. Is it a lifestyle that is sustainable? Is it a lifestyle that you can actually cope with? I commute right now, and for various reasons, but it's doable, right? But it adds to the stress of the job. That's the truth about it, you know. But yeah, let's see. Yeah, Francisco, you nailed it on the head, right? If we face a recession in the next 2 years or so, and then you finish training, or 3 years, and then you come back to the airline and they don't hire you, there's nothing you can do because you've funded your training and there's no incentive for them to hire you because they're not hiring anybody. But hey, think about it this way though. This is something that is possible with any airline. Whether you've done the ATPL, whether you've done the MPL, whether you've self-sponsored, whether it's even fully sponsored. Now, fully sponsored is a bit better because you're not on the hook. But here's something that you need to keep in mind, right? So let's assume that the airline fully pays for your training. You are obligated to that airline for the next maybe 5-6 years, right? Due to that reason, you can't go somewhere else unless they change your contract. So, with the recession, with this recession scenario, the truth is this risk isn't any better on either side, whether it's fully sponsored or self-sponsored. Because, like I said, if it's fully sponsored, yes, you're still obligated to the airline. You technically cannot go work for somebody else unless they change the contract. So you're tied to them. And the truth is, majority of the time, they wouldn't want you to leave because they've paid for your training. That they need to get their own return on investment, unless you're willing to break the contract. But that would also mean that you pay back some of the cost of training. So once you're in that contract, you're locked in, right? And that's why you have to sign the contract at the end of the day. So you're locked in, you're tied to that airline. So if there's a recession, if there is a recession and you cannot leave, then you're still stuck with them and you're not flying, and you're probably not getting paid also. That's the truth about it, because you don't have you have a job, but you don't have a job. You get what I mean? See, yeah, that's true. Also with TUI, you're bonded to flight 73 for at least 4 years. That is correct, Mark. All right. In the grand scheme of things, all right, every opportunity out there, if you qualify for them, make sure you apply. That's my biggest advice. And of course, make sure that you are preparing yourself. Okay, make sure you're doing all the necessary things that you can to be ahead of the curve, right? To be ahead of that, application. A lot of times you don't want to show up at the last minute, all right, and try to kind of wing it. You know what I mean by wing it? Like just taking a chance. You don't want to, because at the end of the day, your chances of succeeding will be limited. The other thing I wanted to cover, all right, congratulations to some of you that have made it through to the next stage of Skyborn. All right, some of you have been notified that you're going to Waterside for your interview, and I think it's worth celebrating. All right, like I was discussing with Mark earlier, a lot of times it takes it takes a lot of effort, a lot of dedication, a lot of hard work to get to where you guys are. So if some of you have been lucky to be, or at least you've made it to that next stage, you've been sent the invitation to the next stage, then congratulations to you. A few things that you need to keep in mind. You're going in for an interview, and I've shared a lot of things about interviews on my channel, but understand that this is really where they get to see you. This is really where you get to shine. This is really where your skills, the competencies, your communication skills, your confidence, those competencies, this is where they get to observe them in person. And the only thing you can really do right now or the best thing you can be doing right now, of course, is I'm guessing you're already preparing. You're already, reviewing a lot of questions. You're practicing. All right. It's good to practice, but be careful of what we call, over practice. Right. When you practice something too much, you become robotic, and you're unable to connect with the person you're communicating with. It's like me reciting something. All right. When it comes to practice, all right, when you're practicing something that is, let's say, a practical skill like flying, the best thing you want to do is to have a very system to it, right? Where you show up, you do the same things the same way every time. And that's where, when you're flying, you try to practice your maneuvers, you practice your procedures, you practice your call outs, you practice different areas of this flying aspect. Why? Because the system is designed generally to follow a pattern, right? So you show up to do the same things every time. There'll be times when it will change, right? Where the situations will come up and you have to be able to adapt or be flexible. But when it comes to interviews, you don't want to over practice. And this is where I always encourage you guys to, if you have the ability and you can afford it, right? It's always worth getting some of those coaching sessions done, right? There's so many programs out there that offer this, preferably in aviation industry. The reason is because you are able to, they give you some necessary tools and tips that helps you to structure your answers in a way that you're not required to memorize anything, if that makes sense, because that's not what you want. So I'm going to give you some tips right now. If some of you are here and you've been invited to that next stage, remember that they are looking for they want you to be yourself. They want to understand who you are. They want to understand your weaknesses, your strengths, and they want to see those transferable skills. If for any reason they sense that you are not being yourself, they would not connect with you, and they are most likely going to not give you the points you deserve. And sometimes they will play these games of, interrupting your conversations, right? So they will ask you a question, we're glad to have you, here at Waterside or here at TUI headquarters or here at Dallas, Texas, wherever you were interviewing, right? They're looking at your CV and they already have a set of questions they're going to ask you, but the first thing they may end up asking you may not be related to what you have on CV or what you've prepared for. If they sense that you have this, you're not being yourself, all right? So anyway, back to what I'm trying to say. So the point here is you don't want to sound robotic. You want to make sure that you just have the detail, the situations, all right? And I've shared STAR acronym, right? But you just want to have different situations that addresses different competences. So for example, your leadership skills. Do you have scenarios? Do you have experiences? Do you have situations in which you have exercised your leadership skill and succeeded? You should have one or two. You should have another situation in which your leadership skill was tested and failed, or maybe you exercised it and failed at that thing. You should have another situation to go for that. Same thing with your teamwork skills. Have one that addresses when you succeeded and how you did it, right? Have the details, right? The information, know it. Now, you don't have to memorize it, but you just have to be able to remember that. Oh, I remember the time I worked at McDonald's, or I remember the time I worked at, this office job or desk job, wherever your experience may be, right? And be able to tie it to those, either the positive outcome of that situation or the negative outcome of that situation, all right? In relation to what? The competency. So this is very important. If for any reason you go through the interview and you are not tying back your experiences or relating them to those competencies, you will lose points. All right. Because you may end up talking, all right, saying a lot of words, but not answering their question. So your goal at the end of the day in preparation for your interviews is to really look for different situations, different experiences, different stories. I call it stories because you are going to be telling stories in which you failed or achieved success, and what you learned from those two sides of the spectrum, whether you failed or you succeeded. What did you learn? What did you take away? And what would you have to do better next time? That would go a long way. The next thing that you want to think about is, what do you know about the airline, right? Have you done your studies about the airline? Do you understand the operation? Do you understand what you will be doing or what you'll be required to do as a pilot? Some flight schools or some airlines, depending on the flight school you're going through, may ask you questions in relation to like the lifestyle of a pilot. All right, what are you going to be doing on a day-to-day basis as a pilot? How do you prepare for a trip as a pilot? And the reason why they ask these questions is really to know if you have an adequate understanding of what you're about to get yourself into. The other thing they may ask you generally could focus on the training, like how do you handle stress? How would you handle failures during training? How would you handle the challenges of training? What would you do if you were unsuccessful on a test during training? Those are various questions that they can throw at you. Now, in all of this though, all right, whether, the questions, the competencies, you're going through, you're answering all these different areas. At the end of the day, they want to make sure that you're somebody that they like. And that's the truth about it. We human beings, right? If you like somebody, okay, that maybe you saw somebody on the street or you saw somebody, I don't know, anywhere, and you like that person, there's a chance, no matter what that person says or does, you tend to look at it on a favorable light, under that favorable view, right? Because it's all based on your perspective. And this is why you may have two people, okay? One person has the technical knowledge, very smart, and knows all the answers to the questions, right? And you have the other person that may not be as smart, right? But is a good person, has a better behavior or better traits, and just that people skills are there, right? You, as an individual, who would you pick between the two? I'm sure you're going to pick the person that has, that is a people person, somebody that you generally like. So the point here is, yes, they want you to be smart. Yes, they want you to have knowledge. Yes, they want you to excel, to succeed in all this assessment. But at the end of the day, they want to make sure that you're truly somebody that they can relate with, somebody they can actually enjoy going on a trip with. Because, remember, the person interviewing you may be a current pilot, a first officer, a captain, an HR person, a retired pilot sometimes, right? And all of that would set into them, like it will set the expectations of, okay, this person, is this someone that I can really that would I really enjoy going on a trip with this person? Would I really enjoy flying with this person? So at the end of the day, they want to make sure that you are a good person. So keep that in mind. Mr. Pilot 007, thanks for joining. So keep that in mind and know that interviews, there's some pattern to it. I always say, don't just go blindly into an interview. All right. Do as much research as you can. And I think for those of you that are, subscribed to my channel and other channels out there, I'm sure you guys are doing your research. So keep doing what you're doing. Keep studying, keep practicing, because remember, everything you do from here onwards would help you even during your final assessments with BA. All right, or with 2E or with Aer Lingus. I know some of you are going through Aer Lingus as well. Yep, go ahead, Mark. We got a time. Nice. Guys, these are the kind of things I like to see. I don't know if you guys can see that, but you guys cannot see it, and I don't want to show the person's name as well. But it gladdens my heart when people come back and tell me, oh, they've gotten through to the next stage, or they passed the exam, or they passed the interview. That really shines a lot of light in my heart, and that is because I feel like I'm doing something great, and, not to take away from your hard work, not to take away from your dedication to the task, because you guys did the work. I'm just literally just coming from the other side of things where I have the experience, I have the knowledge, and I'm trying to point you guys in the right direction. That is really all I'm doing. So at the end of the day, it's really up to you guys to then take the advice and heed the advice, because I can't do that. But it always gladdens my heart when people send me messages like this every time, that they've made it to the next stage, or they're starting their training. And I get this quite often, and that's what really motivates me to keep doing what I do. All right. Would you say that someone who is older than 21 and has a university degree is more likely to get selected than an 18-year-old? So, yes and no. That's Mark. I'm reading the last question here. So, would I say that someone who is older than 21 and has a university degree is more likely to get selected than an 18-year-old? Let me address the two parts here. So the first part is the age part, okay? And this is important. Being young could come with its own disadvantage. And I think I've spoken on that earlier with Mark, especially. When you're young, sometimes you have limited experiences. And when you go in for these assessments or interviews, you struggle. That is the truth about it. So someone that is a bit older might have had the opportunity to work, to exercise their competencies and see what they are good at, what they are not so good at. They're able to have experiences to share during their interviews, and they can talk about them from either the positive side of things or the negative side of things. But when you're young and you don't have those experiences, you show up to these interviews and they ask you questions and you're like, I don't know the answer to that. Or I just don't have anything. Or you just start making up stuff. And when you make up stuff, you ramble. You kind of just go off track and you don't hit the nail on the head. So that is the disadvantage of being young. But there's an advantage if you do the right things. Like I've shared with you, Mark. If you do the right things, you can actually show up to the interview and sway them away, right? Or impress them, because you're so young and the things you've done, the things you've achieved can be impressing to somebody that, hey, when I was 18, I've never done the things that this guy is doing. I'm really impressed by this guy, or I'm really impressed by this lady, or, So the point here is there are two sides to it. Being young can either be an advantage if you've truly done the work, like I've shared with you earlier. If you haven't really done the work, it can be a disadvantage. On the other hand, when you're a bit more matured, you have experiences, you have things to talk about. So you can sometimes do well at an interview because of just the experiences you've had, and especially if they're good experiences. Okay. The other part to that question is the university degree. The benefit of a university degree really comes down to more life experiences and the dedication to the crafts, or your ability to remain dedicated to something. We all know that it's not easy to spend 4 years or 3 years or 5 years in university, right? And if you're going to interview somebody, for example, and the person has a degree, the person might be looked upon a little favorably, all right, because of the fact that they have a degree. They have something to show that they've been able to dedicate themselves through or dedicate themselves to, and it's not easy. So if you can go through university, then you can put yourself through almost anything, right? For 4 years or 5 years, right? And you show that with good grades also, by the way, right? So that would go a long way during an interview. Now, it's not that it won't really be and the bottom line, right? Because all these kind of programs do have requirements, and as long as you've met the requirements to get in, right, and you pass the assessments, then whether you have a degree or not, don't have a degree, doesn't really matter. But it sometimes will play a key role when you get to the point of maybe your interviews, because you have more experiences. You have, maybe you've worked on projects together. You've done a lot of teamwork activities together. You've done some sporting activities that tested your competencies. Those are things that somebody that has gone through, for example, a university might have been able to do more than somebody that hasn't. Again, it depends. So the point here, to answer a question in a nutshell, the age aspect can be beneficial if you're young. The degree aspect can be beneficial if you have it. It's not a disadvantage though if you don't have it. It is not a disadvantage. Hope that makes sense. All right, next question here from can the interviewer ask questions regarding latest update on the aviation industry, example, technology to reduce consumption emissions? So they can ask questions in relation to, for example, why does an airplane fly at high altitudes over low altitudes, right? They can ask that question. It's more like a technical question, or they might ask you, another one that I've seen, I'm trying to think, what can a pilot do to make the planet a better, I can't remember how it's phrased, but the point is it's more about the emissions and reducing emissions and saving fuel, right? Now, what can a pilot do to reduce emissions? And these are things that they can ask you because they want to see that you are in tune with the trends in the industry. For those of you that are going through, say, BA, actually any airline industry right now, they talk about sustainability. They talk about SAF, all right, sustainable aviation fuel. They talk about how to reduce their emissions by 2050 and all this stuff, or net zero carbon emissions by 2050, things of that nature. And these are things that if you are preparing for an airline, should be familiar with. You should know their goals, their missions, and the current task or projects they're working on in different areas. Now, you don't have to be an expert in the subject, but you just want to have enough information to talk about it. All right. Let's see, Mr. Pilot, trip 007 is the SIA Singapore Airlines, all right, cadet program for Singaporeans only, or did they ask? So to answer your question, Mr. Pilot, all right, from what I've heard, it's really for Singaporeans, all right, and I think I actually have it here. Let me share this. I'm gonna share my screen here, window capture, right there. All right. SIA is recruiting ab initio cadet pilots in Singapore. All right. Yeah. So you have to be a Singaporean, right, to be in Singapore for most part, if that makes sense. I mean, you can be an international student living in Singapore, but you have to be, and I know somewhere as well, this one, where is it again? Sorry, the thing jumped on me. So they have different programs. So we can see there's one for Singapore, right? And this is the one that you have to be a Singaporean to apply. And then there's the one for Malaysia as well, that you have to be a Malaysian to apply. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Please don't forget to drop a like on the video. It goes a long way. It's spent about an hour now. If you have any questions, please feel free to share them. So talking about my schedule for this month, my schedule has been quite interesting. Not too complicated, right? I work Tuesdays to Thursdays, and I do about 2 flights a day on each part, on each day rather. And it's a great schedule, but my weekends get busy and I don't get to make much videos as well. And that's why I decided to go online today, because I don't know if I'm going to make a video tomorrow or the day after. I have some things planned, so I may have to, and I have to leave on Tuesday, so, but again, if you have any questions, I'm glad to answer them while I'm here. One of the things that makes it difficult for me to reply to your comments, especially when you have questions, is the time. It takes a lot of time in a day to respond on Instagram, to respond on YouTube, and all that. All right, what advice, this is from Joshua, what advice would you give people about to join a flight school? Well, congratulations to you, Joshua. I was just saying earlier that, I'm always happy when I get those messages of people starting their training or making it through the assessment or getting through the interviews. And you are one of those that that went through, now you're about to start your training. So I'm really aware of that. And I'm always very aware of the fact that most of my videos tend to focus on people that are yet to become pilots, right? For most part, or go through training. And for someone like you that you're about to start flight school, well, my advice to you would be, all right, start with getting ahead, all right, of training. So depending on the school, depending on what program you're starting, I believe you're starting the integrated training, if I remember correctly, which is great because you're able to focus and kind of go through the training and in phases. So my biggest advice to you would be start studying ahead. You don't, and the good thing about this is, if this is something you're really interested in, honestly speaking, it's going to feel like, it won't feel like work to you. It won't feel like it won't be a lot of stress to you. The only thing that may stress you, that I need to keep you informed on, is the flying itself. The flying can be stressful because you're new to the flying. The studying aspect, I believe you can do it. You can study. As long as you show up, you study, you do well, right? But when it comes to the flying aspect can be a bit stressful, and it is also the more expensive part of it, right? You have the grounds where you do like the theoretical knowledge of things, and then you have the flight training itself, or the flying training. The flight aspect can be tedious because it's not something you've done before. You haven't flown in a small airplane. You have to get used to the maneuvers and all those things. So, and that is also where you spend a lot of money. So what you want to do is, really, if you don't have a flight simulator, all right, get a flight simulator. Start playing with that thing, all right? Spend an hour to 2 hours. And by the way, I'm thinking of a project for myself. I used to have a flight simulator. This was years ago, but now I don't. That's it. I had it on this computer actually, but now I've converted this computer to more like editing and video and all that stuff. So I don't really do a lot of flight simulator stuff on it. But I was thinking about that, like it would be nice to set up something that is really good when I have the money for it. But I haven't decided on that because it can be expensive to set up a very good, computer to run these programs and really enjoy it. But the point here is, get a flight simulator. You don't have to spend a lot of money. All right, it's quite cheap to set those things up, and get a joystick, get a rudder pedal to go with it if you can. You can use a joystick. You can use a yoke, depending on what you want, depending on how much money you're willing to spend. But start practicing, okay, and study. Do those two things. All right, start practicing on the same. The good thing also is Microsoft Flight Sim, to be specific, has a lot of training flights where you can practice doing different things. All right, where they actually would guide you. All right, so if you can do that, it will set you up for success before you even start training, and it won't cost you a lot of money. Okay, so that's something that I would give. That's my recommendation anyway. All right, Iberia cadets. Now for Iberia, from the last video I made, I remember, they were only going to take, I I think they were going for 50 people, but then they already had 40, or but the conditions, I do not know. I'll be honest, I do not know the exact conditions for that program. But I believe it's partially sponsored, and then you're required to stay for a couple of years. I can't remember the details now. Again, I go over these different programs, and I'm curious. I don't know how many years you're bonded for. All right, I don't know, but the average that I've seen is around 5 years. Great. All right. So I hope I answered your question, Adria. All right, and thanks for joining, by the way. Joshua, now for the X-plane, that's great. All right, so that's good. Use the Airbus replica side stick. That's awesome, and throttle. For the ground training, awesome. I'm ready for that. I'm gonna give you something here. I'm sure that you've seen. I'm gonna share a link in the chat where you can see a lot of materials. I'm actually renewing my certified flight instructor license certificate. And here are some things that I've been kind of digging my hands into lately. Books, manuals, division. Okay. Oh. All right, I'm going to share this in the chat, and then you can take a look at it. All right. So that link that I just shared with you will take you to the FAA's website, Federal Aviation Administration, right, in the US. I don't know if CAA has one. I'm sure they do have their own handbook or so. So know that some of the information on that handbook will be slightly different, because this is mostly for the US. But the things that I want you to, you should consider reading, of course, understand that the rules are very similar, just they might be called different names. All right. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's slightly different, Joshua. It's going to be slightly different. Some of like the airspaces, some of the rules will be slightly different. But one thing I want you to pay attention to is just more of the general knowledge of flying. All right. So don't be too particular about I don't know if CAA, I don't have any access to any CAA handbook. I don't know if there's one. I haven't seen one anyway. Right, that I've come across. I'm sure there, if you do the search on Google or Amazon or something, you find a book. But this one is free from FAA website, right? So you're able to use that information. All right, Mark. It depends on the airline. It depends on the airline. It depends on the opportunities at the airline. So, for example, if you are with a growing airline, right, an airline that is expanding, they're buying more planes, they will definitely need people to upgrade. They will definitely need new pilots. They will need new captains and stuff like that. So you may be able to upgrade in like 2 years. I mean, it happens in the United States anyway. I know in the UK, EU region, it can take a little bit longer. But if you are with a growing airline, then your ability to upgrade can be much sooner or quicker. On the other hand, it could take up to 10 years if you're with an airline where there isn't any movement. All right, people are only retiring and there isn't much expansion going on. Then a lot of people can be seat progression can be a bit slow. So yeah, it could take up to 10 years in some places, and in some other places it could take 2 years. So it all depends, it all depends. And remember, it all goes back to the opportunities that are available. Sometimes it happens quicker than other, and sometimes you can't time this, right? You may believe, talking about timing, right? I was with the one airline and they switched to the other airline, the airline I'm with right now, which is a cargo FedEx. And prior to me switching, or prior to me coming, things were really booming, right? Because we had the COVID and cargo industry was just making a lot of money. They were expanding. They were getting new airplanes. And the passenger airlines were kind of downhill, right? They were shutting down. Some of them were laying off pilots, things like that. And that was one of the reasons why I decided to leave, because I'm like, I don't want to, So I decided to go to a cargo industry. Now, the cargo industry is very limited in opportunities because things have kind of recovered to where they were prior to the pandemic. And the passenger airline is now like on the opposite trend where they are hiring, they're expanding. So there are more opportunities there than the cargo industry. But, every airline will go through its cycle, right? The cycle is not always upwards every time. Sometimes it's just like the economy, right? The economy goes in cycles. Same thing with the airline industry. So if you catch it at the wrong time or at the right time, you may, upgrade in like 2 years or 3 years. If you catch it at the wrong time, the airlines, well, you could be out of a job in like 6 months, So it all depends, all right? But the training itself to become a captain can be less than 2-3 months, right? Once you start training, once you actually start training, can only last about 2-3 months. Okay. So yeah, but to get the opportunity to get assigned that seat to then go for training could take anywhere from 2 years to 10 years. And these are good questions, by the way, because this sometimes determine where you go. If you can read into the future, for example, some airlines would have more retirement within a certain period over the other, right? Because some airlines do have predominantly young people, which means if you go to that airline, the chances of you being able to upgrade or say move up in seniority can be slower compared to an airline that has predominantly older people, because older people are generally retiring. So those are things to consider anyway. Hi, Sammy. Thanks for joining. Let's see. British Airways offer a future pilot scholarship. Is there anything they look for in particular? Do you know? British Airways, I think I do cover a lot of British Airways videos. What they look for, whether in the future pilot program or the cadet pilot program, very similar. As long as you meet the requirements are different. But what they want at the end of the day are people, competent people that can really do the job. And the goal here is, depending on what pathway you're choosing, whether it's the self-sponsored program, whether it's the future pilot program, whether it's the Speedbird Pilot Academy, right? They all have their requirements. So, I think it comes down to meeting those requirements and being able to go through the assessment or interviews and acing them. So what they look for or what they want is already stated in job requirements, in the job descriptions. And let me see. So there aren't any secrets. All right. There aren't any secrets anywhere. It's really just about preparing yourself and applying. All right. So right here, I'm going to share this real quickly. Let me move this over. I think this is big. Let me see if you can see that. Okay, cool. By the way, for those of you that are thinking of applying to this, right, applications are currently planned to open again in 2025. But yeah, this is the future pilot program that they have. They have a Speedbird Pilot Academy, and then they have the Speedbird self-sponsored pathway, all right, with instrument, post-instrument rating, if you already have your instrument rating. And then they have the Speedbird self-sponsored pathway with ATO. Now, for those of you that were here when I was talking about the guy that got selected last year, made it to the final. Actually, it wasn't the only one. There were a number of them that made it through the final, came really close. Oh, here it is. Oh no, it's not there. Okay, came really close to meeting that perfect score that I shared, 36 out of 36. All right, that was a perfect score, which is 100%. Those guys were offered this pathway, right? And a lot of majority of those people that can afford to do the training and pay for themselves or pay, raise the funds, went with this option eventually. And you can choose Skyborn, L3, Leading Edge, or FTE. All right. So to answer your question, Sammy, what they're looking for are things that I've already covered in my videos on British Airways, pilot competencies. I've talked about different things on that. And honestly, it all goes down to you preparing and having those competencies, right? All right. Joshua, to your question, is it better to join a smaller growing airline or an established big airline? Great question. All right. This is something that not a lot of people think about. And it's always cool to think about that big established airline. However, a growing airline comes with, I was going to relate this to like investing in a business. Okay. If you were to choose a business, let's assume that you had two businesses or two organizations. One of them is well established, it's worth billions of dollars or pounds or whatever. And then you have another business that is just starting out, small, and they still, they're just growing. And they came to you like, hey, we would like to have you on board. All right, which one would you choose? Majority of the people, if you want something safe, less risky, all right, something that isn't like a toss-up where you're like, what am I getting myself into? You'll probably go with something that is secured, more established, big airline. But it comes at a price. I'm going to come to that shortly. The second one, though, that is growing, right, has a lot of potentials, but they're just what they call potentials. That means it could either succeed or fail. And sometimes you're not willing to take that risk. And you have the two offers on the table. So majority of people will go with the established one. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing that. But you have to understand that your ability to, say, move up in seniority, get a good schedule, have access to great positions in the airline. All comes down to the size of the airline in a way, for most part. So back to the big airline. With the big airline, it's well established already. You don't have to worry about the routes they fly. You don't have to worry about the type of schedule you would get for most part because it's already established. So when you join that airline, it's more predictable. So your lifestyle is more predictable. You don't have to worry about losing your job tomorrow, something like that. That's good. So you might go with that. But due to the structure of the airline, due to the number of people that is already part of the airline, due to the number of opportunities that are already filled. Now, there might be more opportunities in the future. You don't know that, right? But the point here is the bigger airline tends to serve as a more safer airline, while a smaller airline that is just growing could in 2 years go out of business. So it really comes down to what is your risk tolerance. And I know this is not risk, not necessarily the safety aspect of flying, but just more about, do you want something that is already established or do you want something that is just starting out? And are you willing to grow with that airline? Because remember, if you go with a growing airline, that means that one, your ability to grow up in seniority will be much faster. Your ability to get a good schedule will be better. You're able to kind of pick and choose what you do in a way because it's a smaller airline. You get to know people. You get to take on positions that are, that are good positions, right? Like maybe become a check airman or become an LCA or become, and I think LCA and a check airman is the same. A chief pilot is what I mean, all right? Those different positions are things that you can do it's much easier when an airline is just starting out because they are slowly growing. They will need people over time. So you can find yourself in different positions, which is great because you learn a lot. It's like I said, it's like a business, right? That is just starting out. So you learn a lot with a small airline and opportunities can be unlimited in a small airline. But in a bigger airline, sometimes it's a saturated place. Everybody wants to go there. Your ability to go up in seniority is slower. It depends. Remember, it all depends on what the economy is doing as well. If the economy is growing, then the airlines are all going to do well. If the economy is shutting down, all the airlines are also trying to scale back. So to answer your question, yes, it's a personal preference. Sorry, I had to go that route to come back to say it's a personal preference. All right. Because remember, the smaller airline can also be an airline that is next to your house, right? For example, you live in a place and this airline is starting out and they pay well, they have a good structure, it's close to the house. Why not? Why do I want to kill myself over this other big airline, but it's so out of the way for me, right? So yeah, it's come down to personal choice. What do you think BA will be looking for to differentiate those who deserve funding and those that can self-sponsor? Now, BA doesn't have to differentiate between those need funding or can self-sponsor. BA doesn't have to do that. What happens is that you go through the interviews, you do the assessments like they are currently doing right now, and once you succeed, and if you meet the requirements, right, they'll sponsor you, whether you have the money or not. BA doesn't care about that because BA they don't need your funding for this. On the other hand, if you make it through to the final stage and you've scored really well on the assessments and then they want to fund your training, and then they want to offer you the job, right, the contract, then you have to fund your training. And that's when they would offer you the self-sponsored pathway where you have to pay for the training yourself, right? And it's up to you to sign that contract, believing that you'll be able to fund the training yourself, not them. Okay, so BA doesn't have to make the determination between those that can afford or can't afford it. They are given an opportunity to 100 candidates, and they don't, like I said, they don't care about who can afford it or who can't afford it. Great question, Joshua. All right, that question, not a lot of people talk about this because, and again, I don't talk about what I do for most part, but flying cargo definitely is more straightforward. It's but it comes with its challenges, and I think I want to make a video on this, but I have always held myself back because I want to focus on just the becoming a pilot or what's the word, doing your interviews and assessment and all this stuff. That's what I've really focused on this channel. But yeah, it comes with its challenges because flying cargo has a different type of schedule. For example, if you think about it, right? DHL, UPS, FedEx, all these cargo companies, all those freight that moves, most of them move at night. And due to that reason, your flying, majority of it will be at night. And I'm talking about middle of the night. I'm talking about like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., maybe overnight, right? If you're doing the international route, you might take off in the afternoon, but then by the time you get to wherever you're going, it's probably night or it's the next day, which can really mess up your circadian rhythm. But the point here is it comes with its own lifestyle challenges. Now, flying in general comes with its challenges, especially even if you're flying passengers, right? If you're doing the long haul flying or international route, you're crossing multiple time zones. So that is challenging on the body. But with cargo industry, right, you're mostly doing night flying, and that is the biggest challenge. But the flying is a lot easier. Easier in the sense you show up to work, you already have your flight plan ready. You look at it, the captain looks at it, you guys do your briefing, you go over your necessary changes for the day, if you have any malfunctions going on, or what we call MEL, minimum equipment list, and you discuss all that, you discuss the weather and any special things you need to do for that day. Once you do your briefing, you show up to the airplane. The airplane is most likely loaded or almost loaded by the time you show up. You guys do your pre-flight. The captain walks around. The captain does the flight deck pre-flight, at least in my airline anyway. The first officer does the walk around. That's generally how it works for most airlines. And then they both meet up once you finish that pre-flight action or steps, meet up in the flight deck, and then you discuss your flight plan, discuss the fuel, the weight and balance you have. When they're done loading, they bring you the paperwork. You check the paperwork. The captain signs off on it, and the person goes out. If it's a 2-man operation, right? Or if it's a 3, because sometimes you're doing some international routes. If the flight is longer than 8 hours in the US, generally would need a relief pilot. If it's more than, I believe, 12 hours, you need a third person, or fourth person. So it kind of goes on like that. So the point here is you literally go through those steps, and then once the flight is ready, You shut the door. The first officer will go shut the door, and then you push back, and then you depart. That's it, right? Unlike the passenger world, where you have these people waiting on you. You show up there, you brief them, you brief a flight attendant, then they start, their customer service things, right? All the service items that you have to go through. Then you do your briefing to your pilots. Then you do the briefing to the flight, to the crew, by the way. All right. And you do briefing to the passengers as well. And then you have the grumpy passengers. You have the happy passengers. You have to deal with all those mixed emotions and people that are in a hurry, people that are late. So yeah, there's a lot of things to consider when it comes to flying passengers. And talking about the flying itself, right? Like I said, that is just even before you take off. Once you take off, you have to keep your passengers abreast of what is happening. If there's any delays, turbulence, all these things means that you're constantly, talking to them, keeping them informed, letting them know what's developing, what's changing, things like that. With cargo, it's just you and your captain. That's it, right? Or you and your first officer, and you have nothing to really talk to other than just the two of you, which can be good or can be bad if you have a good person that you're flying with. Oh, talking about person you're flying with, right? If you have a good person you're flying with, it's awesome because it's just the two of you. You guys are chilling. You guys are talking about whatever you want to talk about at cruise, when the other pilot is flying and you guys are just monitoring stuff. And once you get to your destination, you go do your thing, right? With passengers, you get there, you greet them, you tell them goodbye, you tell them all, it's just a lot of more face, which is good and bad, right? There's a lot of more interaction, right? When it comes to flying passengers, which again, like I said, is good and bad. I did both. I've done passengers in the past. Currently, I'm flying cargo, and I can tell you that it's a lot easier. The only difference is the night flying. The night flying is hard. I'll be honest about that. That is, now don't get me wrong, with flying passengers, you're flying at night sometimes. You're flying in the middle of the nights as well sometimes. You're doing international route sometimes. And same thing you do with, any cargo industry as well. So, but it's something to consider. Majority of your flying with cargo will be at night. And talking about flying with somebody. So this month, right? I think I wrote busy month, right? On the Q&A, on the thumbnail of this video. And I'm flying with the number one captain on my fleet. I'm on the Airbus 300. All right. And I'm flying with the number one captain on that. Do you know how that feels? All right. There's something called power distance. All right. Or think about power gradient in the cockpit. All right. This is something that there's been a lot of research on. If you're interested in that topic, you can go on Google and search power gradient or power distance. I like power distance. Sounds very unique. Anyway, so when you're flying with somebody that is very senior, this person has been with the airline for 38 years. It got hired when it was like 24 or something like that, and he's been with the airline for so long. So the point here is very experienced, like very, very experienced in different ways in the environment, in the books, and everything you can imagine, right? And to be honest, I'm so happy to be flying with somebody like that because they're able to, it has pros and cons, and I'm going to share the pros. The pros are you're able to learn a lot from somebody that has seen different aspects of this thing. And this person has been on the particular airplane. He's been with the airline for 38 years, I believe. 38, yeah. But he's been on that airplane for 28 years. Imagine being on an airplane for 28 years. Like, it's like, it's like you can break it down and put it back together. If you guys understand what I mean. All right. Yeah, I'm going to answer a question shortly. So the point here is, flying with somebody like that, you get to learn a lot from them. You get to get their opinion on things. You get to grow rapidly, and I'm really grateful to be flying with somebody like that. I don't get to fly with people that are that senior. All right. So I'm really happy. I actually took a picture of my. Actually, I can't share it on this computer. But anyway, that is that. To answer your question, Sammy, are there ways of revising for the? Why is this one not showing? for the different assessments for BA? Absolutely. I've shared the links in my videos, and actually I don't have it under this one, but let me see if I can add it now. All right. PASS is one that I always recommend if you're preparing for BA assessments. What else can I recommend to you? If you're preparing for interviews, I actually did make a course or a class that I put together on Teachable. You can always check that out. It's not free, unfortunately, but it's something that I really do. I've put a lot of work into it, and I'm going to make that course even better. And because this is something that I'll continue to develop and work on as time goes on. But let me share the links under the description of this video. Just a second here. So yeah, I'm flying with the person for the month, number one captain. All right, for the month. So it's pretty interesting. I'm enjoying it. It's taught me a lot of things already, and that is something that you don't get to do often. You don't get to fly with the number one person. Now let me share something with you about power distance. So power distance really is the idea that when you have a very senior person and a very junior person flying together, there's always a shift in dynamics of the pilots. So for example, if you are somebody that you're unable to speak up when something is being done incorrectly, all right, there's always a chance that you would not say anything because you're flying with a very senior person, somebody that is of high authority. It's similar to, I kind of don't like this chair. It's similar to something you would see in the military as well. All right, or even in any profession, a professional profession, whether it's a doctor, you might have a very senior doctor working with a very junior student doctor, and the senior doctor might be doing something wrong, but then the junior doctor may be scared to say something because it's like, do I know enough to correct this person that I'm really that I really respect, right? So the same thing goes with flying as well. It's something that and that's why when you go for these interviews, they will generally ask you like questions that are related to you showing how, what's the word? How decisive you are. All right. Your ability to show that you're decisive during interviews will score you points. So back to my story. When you have a junior person and a senior person working together, if the junior person isn't as decisive and unable to voice their opinion, or let their opinion be heard, then there's a chance that the senior person may end up doing things incorrectly, and you have somebody that is not going to say anything. Now, you can actually research a lot of accidents that has happened in the past where the senior pilot was doing something wrong. Case in point, Asiana Airlines, that happened. This was in San Francisco in 2014. I can't remember the exact date. But you have a very senior captain. You have actually a very senior captain that is an LCA as well. All right. Is that like a check airman? You have a junior captain, a junior first officer, and then you have a relief pilot that is also kind of junior. In the Asian culture, African culture, and different parts of the world, you can't really talk back to people that are of authority. All right. You're always too scared to say things. You're always worried that you're going to offend them. And even though this pilot was doing something kind of not standard, right? The other two crew members were too afraid, all right, to speak up. And that is what happens when you have a dynamic between the crew members in which you have a very high senior person and then you have a very junior person. So how do you break that though? How do you keep, because you want a balanced cockpit, right? Remember how they ask you, what's your leadership style? You have the autocratic, you have the democratic, you have the laissez-faire. There's so many of I think there are about 4 or 5 of them. All of this are really different leadership styles. Now, if you have an autocratic senior pilot that doesn't really get your opinion, then your life is going to be miserable if you're flying with that kind of person, right? Because that person would just want to, you must do things their way and you can't say anything, or it's only their way that is better, things like that. On the other hand, if you have a, I guess, democratic, all right, kind of person, and I don't know if it's, yeah, if you have that type of person in the flying with, then it's easier to share opinions and make decisions together as a crew. So the key thing is, through your briefings, through your interaction, and of course, the leader is still the leader, right? But you have a very balanced cockpit in which, you don't have this power gradient or power distance that is inverse, all right? You don't want that. So that is the key thing. Why did I get into that discussion? I guess I got into it because of the person I'm flying with. All right, cool. It's been great. It's been 1 hour 35 minutes. I'm really grateful for those of you that have joined. I think it's time to call it a day. Gotta go work on some other little things that I have to do before the day runs out. It's been nice chatting with you all. Like I said, please don't forget to drop a like on the video. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And I think I have, oh, by the way, Sammy, if you check the description of the video, you would see pass. Where is it? Yeah, start preparing for your upcoming assessments is the third link, I believe. Use the coupon code below for, yeah. So that's it down there. You can use that. And that, honestly, a lot of people have given good feedback about pass. I've used it myself, and that's why I recommend it. And it's going to save you some money. So I wish you guys best of luck. I wish you success. And Joshua, if you're still here, success to you as well in your training. And those of you that are going for your interviews, I wish you success as well. I'll see you